Hello, my lovelies, and welcome to the Heartland Hot Dish. This is where we come to the table and rediscover the connection and meaning to our food and culinary treasures of the Great Lakes region. Join us as we discuss the traditions and stories woven into the fabric of the Heartland cuisine, from the iconic dishes that define the Midwest to the hidden gems waiting to be discovered. We'll take you on a mouth-watering journey through the diverse culinary landscape of the Great Lakes area. Get ready to indulge your senses and ignite your appetite as we explore the rich tapestry of flavors that make up the Heartland Hot Dish. Well, hello, my lovelies. How you all doing? So we're going to have a slice of apple pie today with the Great Apple Pie Debate. Today I've got Lee and Marcy joining us as we talk through all the different aspects of apple pie. We're going to cover, should it be ice cream or cheese? We already know the answer from the Brit. It's going to be cheese all the way. We're going to cover some of the history. We're going to give you tips and tricks, some of the local wonderful apple orchards around us, and which one would be our best apples to get for pie. There's going to be a good debate there. Marcy or Lee, do you want to get us started? Why apple pie today? I know it's the fall, but what makes apple pie so special for you?
Well, Kieran, I know apple pie goes way back for me. It's something that I definitely enjoyed as a kid. I was not typically a huge pie fan as a child, except for apple pie. There's just something about it, particularly this time of year. Um, the flakiness, the tart sweet of the filling.
Are you the cinnamon? Do you put plenty of
I
cinnamon in there?
just a bit. I don't like too much cinnamon in
Ooh,
my pie. I just
okay.
like the tiniest bit.
Ginger? Sorry, now we're going to go in the recipe early. Ginger at all?
I haven't tried ginger yet, but that sounds delightful, actually. Yeah,
Okay.
I would be all about trying some
I,
ginger.
I think I said it like off mic. Like one of the fun things about apple pie, it's my wife's favorite thing. She wishes I make it all the time. I only ever make it if I've got the right apple and I'm at work. It's a very like, I have to have all the right ingredients in front of me and I've got to be willing to do it. There's some time commitment to make a great apple pie. Like a mediocre middle of the road, definitely don't want to play into that world. Is that
It's
somewhat similar?
I have to clear my schedule to make
Right,
my apple
no.
pie, and I do make at least two or three. I do make one
At the
dairy
same
free.
time?
No,
Okay, I was like, wow.
they're
Go to
on different
Marcy's house
days.
for
They're
apple
on different
pie.
days. Yeah, I have to do one dairy free for my boyfriend's kids. With earth balanced vegan butter and lard, but it's something that I look forward to every fall. It is my number one favorite activity. It does involve going to the orchard. I don't typically use store bought apples, and
Yep.
it kind of started for me when I lived in Chicago. I lived in Bucktown, and at Holstein Park every year they have an apple pie contest,
Very cool.
and that's where it really sparked my interest because I would
So
go try
funny.
all these different apple
Chicago
pies.
girl wanting to make apple pie in the city.
Right. Because we weren't going to the orchard at that point. You know, we were using store bought apples. But I would go to this Holstein Park competition and try all these different pies. And some of them were outstanding, and some of them were just kind of like, meh. You know, so I remember thinking to myself, like, I feel like I could make an apple pie that might actually be competitive if
Yeah.
I really thought about it and all the things that went into it. And at the time, I just happened to inherit an apple pie recipe. This is my ex boyfriend's grandmother who gave this to me, and
Oh,
it
wow.
was a big deal.
Sure.
And it is like preserved, hanging on my fridge, like with a magnet. It doesn't go anywhere.
Does it define which apple you should use? Or
It
would you just
doesn't.
say
It
apple?
doesn't. It doesn't define, but and I've actually kind of tweaked the recipe to be my own over the years. But it felt like this is what kind of one of those things where I really felt part of the family by acquiring this recipe. It had been passed down, and so I took it very seriously. And so these are the two things that kind of kicked off my apple pie
Adventures?
adventures. And to say adventures is just, is an understatement because the things I have tried and attempted over the years, I have tried the cheese and the crust. I've tried many different recipes for the crust itself because this recipe is just for the filling, it's not for the crust. So to be able to try to find the perfect crust to accommodate this beautiful filling has been my trial and error over the years. I've had some that are hard as cardboard. I've
Sure.
had some that are
It was just
Absolutely
meant to be the
stunningly
baking
beautiful.
dish when you didn't have a baking dish.
When
Us
you-
Brits understand crappy
yeah,
pastry back in the day.
yeah. I've had some that are just like a soggy mess. Yeah, I've had some that burnt, like in the oven. It's some that were way too thin, So over the years, it's just been a lot of trial and error with the pie crust itself, until I was able to get that down. And then, of course, the filling itself, like I said, I've tweaked it over the years until I've been able to find something that I feel like
Is it now
is
yours to hand
is
down to somebody
it's
else because it's
now
different enough?
mine. It's now mine, and so I need to write down what I actually do because it's in my
As
head.
long as
Yeah,
you record it in metric, everyone in
yeah.
the room will be fine with you by the end of the day.
Okay, cool.
Lee, what about you? So for you, why apple pie? I mean, the three of us are gathered here today to talk about it. What makes apple pie so special for you, Lee?
Well, it was my first sort of dive into pie making was an apple pie, and
At what age?
um, I was probably in high school,
Okay.
I think. And I somehow in our family we always cooked communally in the kitchen. We all had our assignments, and uh, particularly around Thanksgiving, my dad always insisted that there be both an apple pie and a pumpkin pie. So, and I would always tackle the apple pie first, and I sort of used the apple pie recipe in the old Joy of Cooking cookbook and then jump from there. And so what I always like to do, I always like to make an all butter pie crust. I use Granny Smith. I use, well, when I first started, it was always just Granny Smith apples that I would slice up. I would add cinnamon and nutmeg because I'm a fiend for nutmeg,
Sure.
and I would add lemon zest. I would like to add sour cream to the apple pie mix.
There's a theme on our podcast of people love of sour
Yeah,
cream.
it's something
Apple,
about sour
yeah,
cream.
I'd love to add.
I wish
sour-
Daniel was here just to smile and whimsically put in
Sophie,
it. Yeah.
Sophie would be very happy.
And I love sour cream. I add sour cream. So I was curious, Marcy, is your recipe? Do you cook the apples before you bake the pie, or do you? I like going all raw, and I don't like to pre-cook.
I'm
the filling.
so glad you asked this question, Lee, because I know a lot of people do, and they do it for a couple of reasons. One being that it helps to soften the apple just a little bit. They're not going to be too firm in the final baked product, but also because it pre-compresses the apples so that you don't get that gap between your top crust and the apples. So I don't actually pre-cook or pre-bake, but what I do is I toss the apples and the sugar early and let them sit in the sugar because the sugar cooks the apples itself on its own. It breaks them down, right? It releases moistures from the apples, it releases liquid from the apples. So by the time they've sat there for a while, the sugar itself will soften.
You're
the apples.
macerating your apples.
I'm
is what-
macerating my apples.
We sound so fancy
I
when we
mean,
say that.
I
Just
assume
means
you
sitting
put
with
lemon
sugar.
juice in it too. 'Cause
I do too.
Yeah,
Yep.
lemon juice.
Lemon
with acid
juice.
will do the same thing.
Lemon juice and sugar on my apples, and I'll let them sit in the bowl while I prep the rest of
That's what I do.
the rest of the pie. So it does help soften the apples, and then the liquid that collects in the bottom of the bowl, I can then control how much of that I'm putting into the pie. Because the other issue you run into when you're baking the pie is there's a lot of liquid in apples. If you don't pre-cook your apples, all that liquid gets released, and then it has a tendency to be too much liquid where it can make the pie soggy or it can bubble over.
God love you guys for making
Yeah.
things complicated. I love the
It
Brit
has to
over
be
here as the professional chef in the room, albeit Marcy, you really are. My introduction to apple pie was the pasty. So the OG pasty.
Yeah.
And again, we're in Michigan, and so it's a good thing the tin miners would have it as their like pocket food. Do you know where the apple pie was? It was one end of the pasty.
One
So
end
you'd
of
have a meat pasty in the
Uh-huh.
middle, and one end of it would have apples in it, and you'd have an apple pie. 100%.
in
so-
one pasty?
Yeah. No divider, they just in the same pasty. The OG apple pie was down there. Now, the pastry was meant to be crappy because it was just like you're going to get your dirty hands on it and you're just eating the thing inside. But you would have the pasty and the meat pie combined basically in there for what it was. That's the OG where I remember it from my introduction to it. My mum would take us to pasty shops. Anyone from Devon hopes never to listen to this, but we would go to Cornwall for it. There's a big fight over pasties or not pasties in our world, but like, I also remember my mum making them without sugar. Yeah, I know, right? I'm glad today is our first time recording video, so it's going to be our happy place. You get to see Marcy's reaction to me say that. My mum wouldn't use sugar, she didn't use honey, and she would sweeten it with fruits. Like back in the day, that's what you did. Like sugar was expensive. We've talked about that previously. The same with the spices, they were hard to get hold of. You talk about things like the cinnamon or the ginger or things you want to put in there. But she would add dried fruits as the sweetener to the apple, and then the apple pick was really important. I think especially like back in original like English apple pie, because that is our people's food. I know we're doing our American Heartland Dish podcast about apple pie, but it was that the apples weren't a specific variety, and they were mostly cider apples, so they were not good eating apples, and you had to make them delicious on the other side of it, because they're good cider apples is not a good eating apple. And so that variety of which one, we'd asked off camera, like, what's your variety of apple you really love? And like, I think Lee, you had said like a Granny Smith, like a really crisp one. And we had like baking apples, like the big green boys that you would use. But there's so many fun ones you can use now with natural sweetness. Again, I have to say, as like a recovering sugarholic, like my sweet tooth is very sweet, and the dentist definitely knows about it. Trying to get away from the sugar and replacing it with sweeteners that are natural of within reason, like dried fruits in there, has been a really big win. You've never done that. Both of you look at me like I'm a crazy man.
I always put dark brown sugar in my pie.
Same.
Do you never put
Yeah.
flour in with the apples
I do.
when they go in there to
Yes.
soak up some of that liquid?
Yeah.
I shouldn't say I've never. I've definitely pre-cooked apples before. Within reason, I've never pre-cooked apples in pies.
So this is
Or cornstarch, you could
to
use
me
cornstarch.
the key to a beautiful like pastry apple filling.
I thought you were going to go to lattice work, and we were going to start.
Well,
down that
not
bad
yet,
road.
not yet. That's to come. That's to come. No, but, so my filling does call for flour. You cut the butter into the flour the same way you would with the pie crust.
Yep.
And then after I've macerated the apples, they're layered in. I never dump my apples in. They're layered. And after each
Oh,
layer...
you're like a Dauphinoise girl, like layering up your layered potatoes,
almost
like
like a
creamy
tart.
potatoes.
No.
Okay.
Not that. I'm
Are
not that
Are you a
particular, but
slicer or a dicer in your apple pie?
slicer.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
I can live in you. You can get in there well.
Yeah, about a quarter of an inch thick.
Yeah, I'm going to convince you all to come to the apple tart land and not stay in the apple pie land, because a frangipane apple pie is a way better pie than straight up there. Having an almond. Yeah, right? See? You that little bit of Calvados over the almonds.
Yes, so good. So good. But yes, each layer gets then a sprinkling of this flour and butter.
Okay.
Yeah. And then the butter melts, obviously, in the baking process, and that flour and butter helps to thicken the juice that's in there.
Okay.
And
So
it's wonderful.
So mentioned it, but like pie crust was just meant to be that terrible like baking dish because you didn't own a baking dish, and it was sacrificial. Like it would go in the oven and in some ways get scorched on the outside. Over years and years, we got to a place where we want to make it tasty. How do you combine your butter to your flour, you two? Like, what's your go-to, please? Okay, so you've got small dice, cold, and you're flaking it with your hands.
Yep.
Okay.
I do pre-dice.
Okay.
And then once it's diced, it goes into the freezer.
Okay.
But then while I'm actually like cutting the butter in with my hands, I have an ice bath sitting next to me, and I dip my fingers into the ice bath.
Have you ever heard of so there's celebrity TV chefs from my mum's generation back home, and one of the best cookbooks you can get out there is there's a chef from the UK called Delia Smith. She wrote many cookbooks. She was a TV celebrity chef before that was really a thing. And like her best top tip that I have taken for years is you grate the butter coldish, like on a cheese grater, large flake, and then you freeze it. So some people will freeze their butter and then try to grate it. That's awful. Don't do that. Like fridge, cold grater, grate it, put it on a sheet tray in the freezer, flaked up, and then you could you instantly have that kind of pea meal the second you put it in there, and it's ready to go. And so we have a Ziploc bag of grated butter that sits in our freezer ready to make
just
pastry.
ready to go.
Well, and so you can like smash it when it's frozen,
Yeah.
so you can break it up even more. you don't have to overwork. So the least we work any of our doughs makes it much more flaky and being there. I'm telling you, like for the time constraints of dicing, not fun. Who likes to dice butter? Again, the life of a lazy professional chef trying to do things as easy as possible. I got to tell you, grated butter is the way forward. And honestly, it's always 20% cheddar and 80% butter
Yes.
that goes into my pie crust
Yeah.
for an apple pie. And we will get into the cheese and ice cream world of what it is.
Yeah.
But like pie crust for you, what flours are you using? Regular AP, or are you like a high gluten, low gluten person?
I use King Arthur. I use their
All
their AP.
purpose?
All
Okay.
purpose. Yeah. Mhm.
What about you, Lee?
Well, I started out using all-purpose, but I've gotten on the whole grain bandwagon, so I try to mix it up a little bit and add some whole wheat flour.
Yeah, see, I've
Whole wheat pastry flour.
Okay.
I'll use that. Yeah.
See, I've stayed in like the soft, so I will use pastry flour, so a low gluten flour, not trying to hold it together, loosey goosey, so it's falling apart. But then we'll add in, trying to add some things so my kids don't know it's there. Like we'll put in flaxseed, we'll put in chia seeds in there. That adds back kind of that texture that you get from whole wheat. I'm not against the whole wheat; it just makes for a harder crumb, and so I like that like very soft cake flour that's almost falling apart in that world. Sorry, now boring you with my flour love and my ways through butter. Are you milk or water into dough? Look at you guys. You're like, what
Milk.
the heck are you? Oh, really? Okay.
Milk.
Yeah, Marcy.
Dun dun dun. Vodka.
What? My girl, look at you. You are a reformed chef. You're just there. That is so awesome.
Number one secret, and it's not such a huge secret.
Do you know
anymore.
why? Do you know why you do it? I know exactly.
I know exactly
Go
why
for
I do
it. Yeah. She's like, so I can drink a glass while I'm doing it.
So I talked earlier about the trials and errors of the crust making over the years, and I did find even if I wasn't overworking the dough, they still ended up with a pie crust that was not as flaky as I would have liked it to be. And what I discovered,
My joy right now is high. I'm glad this is on camera because I love a good vodka snuck into a lot of things because it does magic. Go for it. Sorry,
does
keep going.
magic. So what happens with water, and the reason why we chill the water is because this has less of an effect if it's chilled. But water does create more gluten as you're working the dough, and so it has a tendency to make your dough a little bit tougher if you're using just straight up water, whereas vodka does not. So if you use half and half chilled vodka and half water, you are less likely to toughen.
You
those
go
glutens
half
to
and
it.
half? She's
I
all
go
in.
half and half with my vodka and my water. And
Which vodka do you use?
just
Just anything off
anything that's cheap. Yeah.
That's amazing.
What is it? Smirnoff. Whatever's cheap.
Sure. I've usually got
Doesn't have to
Tito's
be
in there.
fancy.
Yeah, I've
Yeah.
usually got Tito's sitting in the cupboard. Okay.
Fancy. It's just and the alcohol cooks off. So
Yeah.
if you are not a drinker, you don't have to worry about.
Well, that evaporation happens so quickly baking that, again, the moisture content drops very quickly in the baking process. And that's like a proper chef, like pastry trick
Yeah.
that we have. Like
Yep.
we have all, only ever gone as high as 25%. You're 50-50.
I'm 50-50.
I have never done that.
And
I'm going home tonight. Joni's getting an apple pie. It's happening.
And folks, this is not it's not a huge secret anymore. You can find this recipe on the internet. Just Google vodka pie crust.
I think
and
if you
it'll
go
pop
to
right
like old historic recipes, you're never getting to vodka. It's
You're-
like when you learn catering ways of like baking in a trolley with sternos. This is like one of those things chefs have come up with and played around with.
Yeah.
But yeah, vodka, like high proof alcohol is a really cool ingredient in baking
Mhm.
because it doesn't leave a lot of flavor behind and it does this magic that doesn't let the gluten overdevelop.
Yeah.
Ooh, 50-50.
50-50.
That's my big takeaway today. Do you ever put cheddar? You said you played with cheddar. Have you stayed away from it?
Cheddar. I've stayed away from it, and I do more of a cheddar like as a pairing, and I love this pairing. It's something that I discovered. Like I kind of stumbled into it on my own as a kid, and I feel like this is why I was always destined to do something with food because I would just find these pairings on my own, like steak and blue cheese. I remember discovering that on my own. No one suggested it to me. I was just like, wow, this is a thing. Apples and sliced cheddar they were my favorite snack growing up, and nobody ever suggested it to me. My parents never said, "Oh, you should try this." It was just something I tried on my own. I was like, "Wow."
Have you ever gone
Mind
all the
blown.
way into like savory apple pie where you've made it savory? like put bacon in with your apples and cheese and actually made like a savory. That's like it's like dribbling into the land of like back home. There's something called hominy pie. It's not hominy pie. It's like a potato open like Danish open sandwich kind of pie filling that's got mayonnaise and potatoes and garlic. But instead of the potatoes, you can do apple, and then it's got bacon and crispy bacon in it.
Something I've thought about is instead of, because I do also use lard in my pie crust, in addition to the butter, is using bacon fat instead.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
I mentioned I use King Arthur. King Arthur has amazing pie crust recipes in their cookbook, you guys, and I've used all of them over the years. In particular, their cheese crust is it's very good. They do a really great job. But I remember playing around with this and thinking to myself, like, what if I put bacon fat in here? What would happen? Like, I haven't tried it yet.
Oh
but,
no, that's a
yeah.
good. It's a go. We produce so much. One of my kids is like the second protein they will eat chicken and bacon, and that's it. And when I say chicken, it's a very specific type of cut of the chicken and bacon. So we will produce quarts of bacon fat on a weekly basis. It's great. We will freeze it and we'll grate it in the same way, and you can have grated bacon fat in the freezer. Like that's a go win. No, why I say savory is my mom would always, when she would make pie crust, it was indifferent of whether it was a sweet pie or regular pie, but she would put herbs into her pie crust. So she'd have rosemary or thyme, and even when she'd make a sweet apple pie, there was fresh thyme in that pie crust. And thyme and apple, even on the sweet side, is a real like. And she would, again, my sweet lovely mother, instead of sweetness of sugar, even back then she was adding like dates and prunes as the sweetener. Like we'd mush them up,
Yeah,
and that almost make like a paste, and that became the sweetener. And you get like punches of very tart apple, and then you get very sweet. And we would use like those big old baking apples. Keep want to say potatoes, baking apples that we'd have. So for you, Lee, pie crust wise, anything weird or wacky in there, like the vodka or anything? Are you? She's like, nope.
No, I've, like Marcy, I've had, pie crust for me has always been sort of a hit or miss enterprise. But
Oh, really?
yeah, sometimes it just sings, sometimes it's not. So I don't know. I haven't quite figured it out yet. But
Do you blind bake, either of you?
no, not apple pie, not
I do.
You do blind bake.
not double crusted fruit pies. No.
Do you ever, okay, so no.
No, I do blind bake if I'm making a pumpkin pie.
Sure. No. So apple pie, no. Apple
No.
pie, yes. Do you ever egg wash post?
I do both. I blind bake and then I egg wash. Yeah.
Okay. No, and a hard no in a good way. Okay.
Yeah, no pre-bake.
Do you have a dish size that you usually bake in? Like the size of your pie? Are you a 9, 12? Like what's the size of your pie?
I use a 9-inch
Okay.
deep Pyrex pie plate.
Like I asked that in like pie crust to pie filling ratio. The bigger the pie, the more filling you get, and
Yeah.
play the game.
Yeah.
Well, for me, I don't have the problem. I don't have the problem of the gap between the crust and it because I just pile apples on, pile,
I do
pile,
too.
pile,
Yeah.
pile, pile, and then
Yeah.
cover it
Yeah.
over
With a lid.
with a lid.
Yeah,
With
because
a-
otherwise it's not actually a pie.
no,
It's a tart.
No. But so I always add a lot more.
I just gonna restate that if your pie is topless, if you have a topless pie, then it is no pie at all and has not reached the levels. You'd said there was something. Where was it? That you'd read about like cheese having to be added to it. What state was that?
Oh, Wisconsin has a law.
Yeah, Wisconsin
Wisconsin
cheesesteak.
has a law that where if you're a restaurant or a place that serves pie, every slice of pie has to be served with cheese on top. It's a law.
No matter what kind of pie it is.
No, it's apple pie.
Oh,
Apple pie.
That's amazing. I love that. No, so like in England, you have to have a top. And when we say top, we're not talking like loosey-goosey latticing. We're talking like a full-on crust top.
Yeah.
Are you a crimper or just like water glue? Do you egg wash glue?
No, I crimp it. I do.
All right.
I crimp it.
I'm going to get to the deep side of it. When you egg wash, do you egg wash your pie when it bakes on the outside?
No.
Egg wash?
Yes.
Okay, when you egg wash, do you whole egg or you egg yolker?
I do whole.
Can I get you to just do yolk and get that white out of there? The white creates a weird streaking. So yolk, a little bit of water,
Okay.
and a pinch
Yeah,
of salt.
yeah.
And
I
then
usually
take the
do
white out. Get the white out of
get the
there.
white out. I usually do whole egg and water, but yeah, I can take the white out.
I usually do water as the glue, but then I'll
Yeah.
egg wash the outside of it.
So I do
Sorry.
I do a lattice crust.
Oh, God.
I know. I do a lattice.
Do you ever
Yeah.
lattice, Lee?
No.
Okay, thank God.
And when
There's
I
2 to 1 here.
when I do the lattice, so I have it set up on my cutting board, right? And as I'm crisscrossing, I use the egg wash as a glue between the the crisscross to make sure they stay together. Then the lattice, as I'm starting to bake the pie, goes into the freezer. And then in the last like 20 to 25 minutes of the pie, I slide the lattice on the pie. and then flip it
Oh,
on. Mhm.
you're a late latticer.
I'm a late latticer. And then that gets egg washed before it goes in because then it helps it brown faster.
I know that we'll definitely have a recipe out there for folks to have and play with.
Yeah.
But do you bake hot and fast or like medium? Like, what's your temp? Is it your 375?
I do start it off like at 425 and then I lower it to 375.
So you get a good sear and then come back down, Lee.
Mhm.
It's been a while since I've made an apple pie. I would say I think it's a steady temp for like
Okay.
45.
I'm in the same. Like I like hot, come down in temp for the
Yeah.
low slow cook. Are you an hour bake?
It's about an hour.
Yeah, which is always disturbing because I was like, it doesn't need to take that long. Are you convection? No convections.
No.
No convection.
No convection. You just in your oven under the stove that
Mhm.
maybe doesn't have convection.
I have convection in my oven, but I don't use it for my apple.
All right, last point. I know. Sorry, I promised we're going to get into our cheese and ice cream in a second, but I need to know this. What's your pie like tin? What is it?
I use Pyrex as well.
Pyrex?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
A
Okay.
pie, yeah. A deep,
What?
A deep
Yeah.
dish
Both of
Pyrex.
you?
hmm Do you know why, Kieran?
No, I don't know why. Tell me why.
Because I need to be able to see the crust and what it's
Is
doing.
that real?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I need to make sure
No.
it's not browning too quickly on
You
the
know,
bottom.
there's 2 different types of Pyrex too, right?
hmm
Like,
Yes.
there's a whole like TikTok world of Pyrex. If you go out there, there's a couple of Pyrex superstars in the world. I love some Pyrex, but not for baking a pie. Really, glass?
Glass.
All your pies? Is
Mhm.
it that why you do it so you can see the crust?
Yeah.
That is the weirdest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah.
Well, and I've also
How much are you
I've always-
inspecting it?
I've also got this this was I don't know 10 years ago. I did a couple of holiday gigs at Williams Sonoma, and they had this pie plate thing with it was like it looked like a donut, and then it had a raised the hole in the center was raised with coated with silicone, and you sit your pie on top of it, and that helps the bottom crust bake.
That brings me to another question. Um,
I'm still like shocked by the
So
pure
I-
Pyrex
I-
over on
I-
that side
I
of
am-
the table.
and I feel like it actually started when I was doing the cheese and the crust because I wanted to make sure.
Terrible transfer of
Yeah.
heat. You do
Yeah.
understand that, both of you. Like,
I-
glass is not the game show.
Oh, but I don't know. My crust turns out.
My crust turns out fine.
Yeah,
I'm
but
using glass.
it's pretty darn amazing. Vodka. But it started out when I was doing cheese crust because I wanted to make sure the cheese wasn't browning too quickly in the crust as well.
Do you
know, so
flour, butter and flour that, or you just straight in that Pyrex and move on with your day?
I butter the pan.
You don't butter, Lee. I'm seeing you
No.
shake nothing.
No, I just put
I
the
butter
pie
Have
the
you
in.
ever
So-
tried like cast iron? I'm gonna give you okay, we're not sponsored by Lodge, but anyone knows Kieran Hales knows I love some Lodge pans. Lodge, you can sponsor me at some point on this podcast. But a Lodge cast iron pan, the retention of heat post cook for residual, I love residual heat cooking. Any residual heat cooking, and also you can get the pan hot and going right from the get go. And there's something about like that sensation of cooking. Glass is like somebody who uses a glass cutting board. Like my eye twitches here just a little bit for
It's
you.
not a cutting board.
I know, but I'm feeling like we're trapped in the 1970s over there. To see the crust, that's fascinating.
See the crust. So the other thing I wanted to mention, because they have these really cool silicone inventions out there now where you can wrap these things around the edges of your crust so they don't burn, because I used to use foil. But now
What?
they have these
No.
silicone things that you can just like
No,
flip
you
around.
tinfoil around your crust
I-
because you can't bake it right?
Kieran!
Seriously?
No.
Do you do that on every pie?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Lee?
Mm-hmm.
Not every pie, but I do it
Yeah.
Oh, I'm out.
and it's just the
Is
edges.
it-
It's just
because
around
I
the
can't bake
edges.
it right. I do need to make you my pie.
I
Then you
apparently we
can-
should have brought our pies and see whether that's wild.
Yeah. But
That's so much
this is the
extra
thing. You
work.
can go to Williams Sonoma or wherever. It's not extra work. You just put it on at the beginning and then you take it off towards the end.
Well, you're a lattice later, which I do
Exactly.
appreciate a lattice
That's
later.
that's when the silicone or the tin foil comes off.
All right, we've got to move on.
When I
Okay.
do the lattice later.
So I know Lee's got some strong feelings over there, but like, irregardless of, let's just say we've got a sweet apple pie. It's not savory. It's not the weirdness of Kieran's. It's been sweetened with dried fruits. We're going ice cream a la mode with some ice cream or gelato, either of the two, or heavy cream, or cheese. And like, cheese is such the win.
Cheese is such a
Like a good, like crystally well-aged cheddar. Like if you want to go pick one, and this is a pitch to go to the Zingerman's Deli and grab it, or any of the cheese producers around you, go get Lincolnshire Poachers. The best. It tastes a little bit like a hayfield. Like after they've cut fresh hay is the taste inside that cheddar. So good. But like, oh, some sharp, cold, like you don't want it warm. Like you're not trying to get like all the flavors fully developed, but a slice of warm, like cinnamony, gingery apple pie with your dates and prunes in it to sweeten it, not sugar. And then you got this lovely slice of cold cheddar.
Well, cheddar.
You're a cheddar girl, right?
I
You
am a cheddar girl. My grandfather on my dad's side used to eat cheddar with his pie.
Solid
Yeah,
win. And
yeah,
Lee,
solid
not
win.
at all.
Yeah.
She's like, nope.
I love cheese. If I had to say one of my favorite foods, it would definitely be cheese. But not on pie.
Really?
Not on pie.
Do you ever melt? You ever done the melt on top?
No melt on top.
I've done a melt on top. That's also very good. But I'm a cheese on toast kind of guy
I
too.
could see. I like the idea of like caramelizing the cheese.
Brrr, yeah.
Yeah. Or speaking of caramel, a caramel apple pie with cheese. I think.
Do you have a guilty pleasure thing, like how you add things or reheat an apple pie? Because I do. Like there's many guilty pleasures as a recovering professional chef who's trying to be as lazy as possible and enjoying his life now. I love a microwave slice of apple pie that's over microwave, so it's slightly, like it's way too hot. Like the inside is kind of turned back into molten lava, and then you pour ice cold like cream over the top, like a good, an unhealthy amount of heavy cream. Like it's gone up the bowl dish up there, and that instant like hot to cold, that's a happy place.
And you don't like ice cream?
I don't want ice cream with it.
Oh,
Like ice cream has a very so ice cream has a very special place in my past and my history, and we should probably talk about like a gelato ice cream. My mum, we were not wealthy as a family in any way or means, and we were not poor. But my mum would so I come from a very small village, and you could go get local cream like in the village, like unpasteurized. My mum would make fresh iced cream. And when I say that, I use those words very carefully. Iced cream. So she would take heavy cream, she'd put it in the freezer. It would have meringues in it that were whisked.
Yeah.
So you'd have cooked meringues that were folded in. Those were the sweetener and the like fluffier maker. And then she'd stream melted chocolate, and you'd have like walnuts or pecans in it folded into the thing, or hazelnuts was always the best. And there was this white ceramic dish, I don't know, like maybe 6-7 inches, lined with tinfoil, and every 20 minutes you turn this thing, and it would crystallize quickly, like over a couple of days. So it was something that was always being made. There was always another batch of this ice cream kicking in the top of the freezer. So like ice cream is like its own like magical place for me, and like I can't like.
Yeah.
I don't want it with anything else.
That sounds amazing.
It's really good.
Sounds
Katie Frank recently made it. So it's out if you want to go to the interwebs. There is an Instagram video in our stories for Corman Farms. We made a video of how to make it because it's super, like, it's not complicated, but it's a labor of love. Katie Frank made me some and brought it out to our Oktoberfest thing at the farm. And she's like, wow, That was
Yeah.
not the easiest thing to
Yeah.
make. Like you've got to make
Mm.
meringues by themselves, and my mum would always have meringues because we had way too many egg whites in there. Sorry, I diverge. But yeah, ice cream, no, it needs to
Now,
be
when you
like
say
Well,
meringues, you mean just whipped up egg
whipped.
whites?
no, 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 no,
Uh,
baked
baked,
meringues.
oh,
Baked
baked
Yeah, yeah,
meringue.
meringues.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
They were crumbled up in there, and they become like the leavener sweetener of it. Because iced cream was literally that once a day. Like again, go back to the good old days of Brits being really clear with our words. We were like iced cream.
Ice cream, not ice cream. Well, so like dairy, was very much a prominent ingredient in pies for the Europeans, like over the centuries,
Yeah.
and so this is why this has come about. And ice cream, if you think about it, is churned creme anglaise, So even just like a heavy cream
I'd
with
much rather.
pie is just something that goes back, and
Yep.
and I think just really picks up on the palate, and people love that combination of like that richness
I think if anyone
with
who's
the
listening
sweetness.
today, and there's plenty
Yeah,
of you out there listening to this, try that cheddar cheese slice with one.
right.
Give it a whirl because it's super satisfying. Also, if you want to be really risque, go into the realm of blue cheeses if you can bear it, because
And or Gruyere.
oh yeah,
Gruyere
yeah,
is
yeah.
like just a softer, more buttery.
Yep, yep.
Will go hand in
There's
hand.
a cheese that I love, Koenig. It's like this creamy, really intensely creamy cheese.
Yeah,
Koenig is
Koenig
so
is
good, and
good.
you like a really thick slice of that with some apple pie. And you like, did you
Cabot,
do you
white
just
cheddar.
do you eat a bit of both, or do you mush them together sometimes? Because I like a good like blend them together in a
Blend them together.
yeah,
Yeah,
back of a
yeah.
fork in there.
So for me, it also again depends on what exactly we're topping the pie with, because another style that we didn't mention is the oat crumble on top, and then something that
Yeah,
actually
because we're not
I
talking about anything other than the
listen.
pie. And we can talk about a crumble or a
Listen,
cobbler. We could do a whole nother podcast
listen,
about there, Miss Marcy.
listen. It is, you guys. It has its own magic. It does.
It
If
does.
you
I
do
love a
it
good
right,
cobbler.
You're
like
talking about a Dutch apple pie. That's
Oh my God, it's still not a pie, guys. No top, topless. It's a
so.
topless pie.
When I'm doing the oat crumble for my boyfriend's kids, this is what they prefer. They love it. So when I make their pie, they get the oat crust on top, and my boyfriend helps me make it because
You will late add that too. So did you bake the pie without it and then add it, or do you go right from the
I
beginning?
actually that goes on from the
Right in the
beginning.
beginning.
Yeah,
Okay.
because it has to firm up. That's the pie I'm eating with ice cream, and
Okay.
that's
I
the
can
pie. Yeah,
see. I respect that. That's got some sugar, and you've gone all in, and you would
yeah,
like that.
yeah.
I just do you. I I know that like the creamery here will make gelato. You're ice creaming, or you really gelatoing? Which one are you actually doing? Like you an anglaise, or you need to go into the like
I'll
gelato
do
world?
both. I'll do both. Again, like the kids are dairy free, so we end up having to get like the coconut milk based.
Yep.
But I personally don't mind a real vanilla bean gelato from the creamery.
I see.
Or
The fun memory I have is that obnoxious yellow vanilla ice cream you got as a child. Do
like
you
the
remember?
French
French
vanilla.
vanilla.
Yeah, no, right. That it has nothing to do with vanilla. I doubt there was an ounce of vanilla that even like vanilla like looked at that ice cream.
It's
That's the
more-
most vanilla
It's
flavor it
more
ever got.
like custard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember that from like secondary school as like what you would get, and like I missed that. And it was always soft and easy to scoop. The chemicals in it must have been strong to hold it together in that world. No, right? Like I feel like that's a good place to be. We said we'd cover some of the history. So, like, why and what. This is a Brit thing, apple pie, right, Lee? Like, this is OG us.
partially.
You're welcome. Like, it's back there as well. It's not like yesterday's stories. Like, this is an old thing for the
It's
Brits.
a Brit thing. The first pie recipe noted was from the 1300s, right? And
Apples were spelt different back
Uh,
there. You know that?
yeah,
We spelt it with an IL
yeah.
because that's the better way to spell things.
And to sweeten, sugar wasn't readily available until the 1500s.
You're welcome. We
so-
put dried fruits in it. We
Yeah.
did. We
Yep.
totally did that
Pear-
back then. But see, my mom's just
pears.
living in the past.
Yeah, pears were used to sweeten
Yep.
the pie back then. And we talked about crust not being edible.
It was inedible.
It was inedible.
They worked hard to make that not
There's-
pleasant.
There's no sugar in the crust, and it was just literally a way to bake and hold and preserve the pie.
And you'd, Lee, I think you'd said like where apples came from originally. Like, what was their journey through Europe? Like, where did they start out as apples? I guess that's something I don't know that much about. Like, because apples are
So
so much of
they-
our past.
They're native to what's present day Turkey and Kazakhstan
Okay.
and Asia. And we've got the Romans, the ancient Romans, to thank for bringing them to Europe, and then that just made its way throughout Europe.
What was the Romans' impetus to spread them? Like, what was the thing they were using them for? Do you know, like, why the Romans chose to spread apples so far and wide? Like, they usually had a purpose.
Probably to make alcoholic cider,
Okay,
maybe, perhaps.
that's what I was hoping we were going to stay with. And well, I mean, we're going to get to Johnny Appleseed. It's a lie in just a second.
It's not a lie.
Well, he
Not a
he
lie.
wasn't spreading like apple seeds around. He was doing some cuttings. I'm just gonna live in the world that if he was spreading the apple seeds, I've got to.
Yes, he was.
He was getting some apples
So,
in around.
so Johnny Appleseed does, in fact, his name was John Chapman.
He's a real person. He
He's a
just
real
wasn't.
person.
He wasn't. It's a terrible name.
And
It should
that-
have been like Johnny. Here's a twig.
And that's that Johnny Appleseed just stems from the folklore that rose up around him. But he did actually cross what was then the western frontier, which is now the
He taught
Midwest.
people how to graft.
Yeah.
He
Johnny
and
Grafter. Like he was a bit
He
of a grafter.
established-
Way better story. It sounds like a good Londoner right
But
there.
He still contributed, right?
he sta-
Kieran.
well he planted over 100,000 trees, whether he grafted them or planted seeds.
He's not planting the seeds.
All right, well, he established apple orchards all through the Midwest: Illinois, Indiana, Ontario.
You all know why you can't do that, right? Like why you can't plant seeds.
Apple seeds,
Yeah.
specifically.
Yeah. Why,
Yeah.
if you have, say you've got a delicious, oh my God, I'm not going to say a pink lady apple tree, and you take that seed and you plant it, you know what happens, right? It does not produce a pink lady apple tree. It like freaks out and makes something completely bonkers. It's a completely different apple. There's like a whole, I'm not going to Google, guys. You go ahead and Google. But there's a whole science behind doing that and taking those seeds from different apples and seeing what Mother Nature does as it freaks out and produces a brand new varietal that comes out of it. Apple seed from apple is not, it's got nothing to do with the apple. Like that apple seed is like freaked out and decided to make something completely amazing or gross. And it literally is that extreme. And so where I come from in Devon, they would do it all the time. Like we would plant 2 or 3 apple trees a year from seed to see what was created. And then if you got one you really liked, you then grafted. And you grafted all the time. That was the only way to play the game. Not even planting, it was grafting. So you would have a base crappy tree and then you would graft onto it. And you can graft onto not apple trees too. Like you can graft an apple branch onto pears and different things like that. It doesn't have to be the same one.
So, what are some local orchards who have like mastered
I know.
this grafting technique?
So like if you've listened to our podcast, Marcy is a big fan too. I love my alders. They're out by Chelsea Proving Grounds. So Chelsea Proving Grounds, out by Chrysler Proving Grounds outside of Chelsea.
In
It's like,
Manchester.
yeah,
It's
like
Alber.
Albers, and they're just
Yeah.
amazing. Like their apple varieties and the apples they produce are like patchouli delicious, and they've got really wonderful varietals. And you can go in there and they won't have one for a while because they haven't picked it or it's not ready. They're really great. You talked about Wireds.
Wireds,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's like where you go. I feel like that's where I take my kids when we want to have fun at Apple Orchard. It's not that Alders isn't. It's just that Wireds has all the like fun activity stuff to go do. And they've got great apple varieties. There was one other you mentioned as well. Oh, was it where you were getting the Nemeth's
Farms.
apples? Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I've been out there for sure as well. There are lots of other good apples. If you're going to the store, don't go to the store. Go to the orchard. They need you, right? They just absolutely do.
And Alber is now you pick. They were not you pick before.
They've got a new little barn out there that you can
A
like,
tasting room.
yeah.
Go drink some of their hard cider and go pick some apples. So what apples do we like best? I know that Lee mentioned Granny Smith, and I've definitely used Granny Smith for my pies in the past. Northern Spy.
Have you ever had that one?
My dad loves Spy.
Oh, I love a spy.
He loves Spy. So usually when I make him a pie, it's
See,
with Spy.
That's the bit like I can say you should go use or try a Northern Spy out there, and you're not going to be able to go find it in the store. You have to go to some orchards and see what they're growing and what that looks like in that world.
Well, when I lived in Pennsylvania, and this is probably my favorite apple, I always made pie pies with Stamen wine sap apples, and they were just amazing.
Okay.
Okay.
Fantastic.
Nice.
And I tend to I'm very much in the tartar the better camp.
Oh,
Tarts are
100%.
better,
Yeah. Well, you can fix that on the other end with
Yeah.
your dried fruits.
Well, Jonathan's are my go-to, and I know that some of these apples that we're talking about, they're a little bit smaller, so you'll just have to use more. But
Yep.
Jonathan's are my tried and true because they, to me, have the perfect balance of tartness to sweetness, and they're perfectly crisp. So you don't want a mealy.
Have you ever had? Yeah, don't
Don't
go
want a
mealy.
mealy
You want
apple,
like a
yeah.
good crisp apple. You ever had a Rome Beauty?
No.
See, this could be a whole fun thing all by itself. We should really get somebody like from like Alber's come out here and like talk because varietal wise, it's mad. It's the wild west of names of different things. But the Roman Beauty, I think that's the one that's like extra. Like it's got a good like not sweetness at all, but it's incredibly crisp. Like the texture is such a good win with that in that world. Like they do that tasting out there where you can like the flies are everywhere because as soon as you start cutting apples, they're in that world. But a Rome Beauty is really good. But the Northern Spy, I like
Yeah.
got that power.
Mm-hmm.
What about like a store bought apple that you're gonna go get? You said Granny Smith's
Or Honeycrisp.
Honeycrisp.
Honeycrisp, or I have used the Pink Ladies.
You and John, I think is that the one John Mason loves. My chef in my kitchen loves a pink lady. I'm like, move on with your life.
Yeah, Pink Ladies. I've used the Jazz in a pinch. Typically, some of my local stores, like Bush's, they do carry the Jonathans.
Oh, really?
So
Nice.
I've watched for them. Let's just say, like it's time to start making pies when they're out in the stores.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any like, as far as like other things you'll add into that pie other than apple. So you've got some sweetener. You said brown sugar, white sugar, brown sugar.
50-50.
50-50.
Yeah.
Do you add anything else inside the pie on a regular? Or are you like, I need my purist of apple pie? I'm pretty sure Lee's the purist. I want just apple.
Lee and I have both talked about using a little bit of lemon juice.
Yep.
It helps to prevent browning, but it also helps to macerate, right?
Sure.
I put the zest in too.
Zest.
I use zest as well.
Zest is a good idea. And then as far as baking spices, just a pinch of cinnamon, nutmeg. Too much cinnamon will completely kill your pie. It would just annihilate.
100%.
Yeah,
I'm not a
100%.
big cinnamon fan in
Yeah.
general.
Yeah.
And you said you haven't done ginger before.
No, but I do want to try
Both
it.
is really good. If you had fresh or dried, they both work pretty great. And I've done fresh. And fresh is like very different feel of that pie. Like a little like tiny grate of that in there, like on a zester. In the same way like with the microplane. Really good win.
I know we've talked about, of course, butter going into the filling and into the crust.
Yep.
I know some folks probably do use salted butter. I prefer to use unsalted butter, but I do add a pinch of salt to
Yeah.
the filling.
If you can, I think anyone who's listening, the reason nearly all the recipes that you'll ever get out of me, at least, they're all unsalted. It lets you just control the salt. The inconsistency of salt being in there, what it is. Anything else for you, Lee, that gets in there?
Nutmeg.
Nutmeg, that's it. Okay.
Nutmeg, yeah.
No weird or wackies?
Sour cream.
I mean, wait, I'm coming. Yeah, you put sour cream in. That's out there a little bit. That's
I
like
put-
my
I put
mother-in-law who
sour
puts
cream.
yogurt in her lasagna. I'm like, okay, you've lost me.
I like sour cream. I like tons and tons of sliced apples. I kind of go crazy with the apples. I usually probably twice the amount that the recipe calls for.
Have either of
do
you,
too,
have either of you ever seen a YouTube video of a group out in California called Chef Steps? They make the dual sous vide. They made a recipe a couple of years ago of like the 1,000 apple pie. And so like they dehydrated a bunch of them to make a powder or seasoning to put in there. Literally managed to, I might be exaggerating. Google and correct me, everyone. But like it was like they turned 1,000 apples into one pie. Right. Like they made the most intense, like it's the most ridiculous apple pie recipe you would never ever make ever.
They dry the apples out.
Not all of
first?
them. So they would take some of them they dried and dehydrated and make into a powder. They freeze dried some others. They layered them really thin in like multi-layered. It's a huge. It's a big pie, but it's not like a mammoth pie. You should go look at it. It's kind of cool. Then they make like, oh, this is a pie you could make of that world.
I have one debatable item. Do you peel your apples or not?
Absolutely 100% peeled.
Peeled or not?
I'm toying with keeping them on.
Yeah,
But in the past, I've always peeled them. But
my mother would always peel them. She's not with us anymore, so I can get away with it. I'm again Mr. Lazy. Leave those skins on and move on with your day. Do you want my weird and wacky? Gotta love the guy over here. Like, oh, we should just do it purist. No one ever knowing me would think, oh, that's what he does. Sumac. Yeah, you're like, oh, that makes sense.
Really?
That like slightly like acidic taste that pushes through. Sumac is for the win inside an apple pie. Next time you do it, just a little bit of sumac in there, or a lot. Put a lot. I'm taking the vodka out of this for sure to put like up in my vodka because I put vodka in my pie crust.
now sumac in powdered form.
Yep,
Okay.
yep, 100%. And like it gives that zing, like it wakes it up. And then the really bad one. No chefs should ever listen to this who have been my friends in the past. MSG.
Oh, Kieran.
Although it's not getting the bad rap that it once did.
The bad rap was all pretend. It's out there. It exists.
It is, and I do
Yep. Right.
appreciate.
I'm
MSG.
glad Daniel's not here for today's podcast where he can like glare at me.
You
through
would
the
probably
screen.
shrivel up, but it's that umami that we
Yeah.
all like crave and love.
yeah.
And I like.
I'm not talking a lot. I'm just talking a little bit of MSG, and that makes everything a little bit better.
It does. It does. So don't knock your MSG. But I've never tried it in a pie. I'm curious.
I will bring you both next podcast some MSG and some sumac that you can put in your next pie. Give it a whirl. I'm telling you, it's like, oh, okay.
How about you just make us a pie with?
I've got to go home and make Joni a pie tonight now. Apparently, that's going to be my
What
world.
else do you
Me
put
too.
sumac in? Because I've been toying with getting some of sumac and kind of
Oh yeah.
putting it in lots of different things.
I guess if you're listening, like if you have a spice in your house, it should have a journey of lots of things and not one. So if you're gonna like what you're actually asking is one of my favorite questions in food is like, if I'm putting this in my fridge or I'm putting this in my pantry, this thing has to get used a lot. Like if I'm using desiccated coconut to make Florentines or something else, then I need to make fridge cake, and then it's got to turn into these lots of things. So I'd say sumac goes in a lot of our soups. We put in there as like that wake up. It's like we don't always have a lot of lemon, limes, and oranges kicking around in our house on a regular basis. They don't get used that much, and so sumac's like that wake up citrus kind of kick in there. And so we've also put it in the crust on the top, and what that looks like in the crust on the top of the pie as well. We've put sumac will go into brines for chicken. We've also used sumac as a ground up seasoning on the outside of steaks before you sear them as well. Like it's just got that right kind of kick into things. We've drifted from pie, haven't we?
And what color is it? Red?
Yeah, it's a red.
I
It's
mean,
red rice.
I
You usually
my
get it like
only,
flaky.
my only experience with sumac. I went to a farm day camp, all throughout my childhood, and they had sumac trees all over the place.
100%. Yeah.
We would take the buds and we would juice them and make sumac aid. And it
Okay.
was lovely.
Oh, interesting.
Lovely.
Sumac aid. Oh
Huh.
my God, Ari's gonna hear this, and it's
And
not
it's-
limeade anymore. It's
gonna be
sumac aid.
sumac aid. We were getting a new juicer at the Roadhouse, so I can picture him.
Yeah.
just, somehow throwing this into whatever we're juicing and creating something out of it.
Sumac aid.
But it adds.
We made root beer out of sassafras roots.
Oh yeah, love some sassafras.
Yeah.
Roast. No, all right, we're coming to the end here. Is there any last burnings you would want to tell people about apple pie in that world? Is there a good place to get a good slice? Like out there, is there a favorite diner you've gone to that you love an apple pie from, or a good pie shop where you get them from?
I
It's
mean,
okay to be no.
The Zingerman's Bakehouse makes a really good apple pie.
Their sugar
so,
crust on
yeah,
the outside is really
yeah,
good.
It
I
is
ha-
very tasty.
It
So,
rebakes great.
Yeah, as we go into apple pie season, it'll be available at the Roadhouse, of course, at Zingerman's Bakehouse. Stop in for a slice, have it with a scoop of real vanilla bean gelato from the creamery.
Whatever, get a slice of cheddar. Get
But-
some Hook 7 year.
But we have some Hook 7 year on the menu too, so come in and get a slice of apple pie and ask for some Hook 7 year.
Is there anywhere like a diner where you've eaten that you're like, oh my God, I remember that apple pie?
I have to say, I only like the pies I make myself.
Okay, Lee, I'm glad you were the one to say it first.
No.
I mean, not to be an apple pie snob,
Sure.
but I really do love my own apple pie the best. I do.
I like my own apple pies. I like my own. cake. I like my.
Ah,
And
Where's the local IKEA? Where's that IKEA that's near us?
there's
Canton.
Canton. That's
Canton. Okay, so there's a diner maybe 10 minutes away from Canton, from that IKEA store that we drive up towards, and we've gone. There's like it's a burger diner. It looks like all American diner, like a little silver bullet on the side of the street.
Mhm.
And we've gone in there to get burgers before, and they have a great apple pie. I'm not going to be able to name it. I will put it in the notes later and add it to the thing, but really good apple pie. A fresh apple pie is the hard game, right? That's the thing.
Yeah.
Like anything that's sat around for any decent amount of time, and even like a pre-bake that you're rewarming is a hard call. Like
Well,
we usually I guess we really are then. Do you fridge your apple pie?
absolutely 100% no. It
Yeah,
is a shelf
okay.
item. It is a pantry item.
Yeah,
So
that's why you have a pie
but
cupboard.
yeah, it's going to and
Pie
it's going to be
chest.
consumed within a day.
2-3
and a half
days.
Anyway. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
2-3 days we
a couple
usually
of days because I ate pie for breakfast, I ate for lunch and dinner, and I share it. So it's not something I just eat by myself. Um, but I am a stickler for not
I found myself like
refrigerating it.
making sorry, High Lodge, you can sponsor us anytime you like. They have a much smaller pie shell, and I do like a smaller pie, so I don't feel like I've gone out of because me and Joni will eat it, but the kids aren't so into that side. I love that the kids in your house definitely do enjoy it, whereas in ours not so much.
Mhm.
But I like a smaller pie for that, and I don't mind a high crust to filling basis.
I
Like a smaller pie, I
prefer-
like to control
yeah.
that baking.
I prefer a certain ratio of crust to filling.
Where are you venting your pie? Sorry, now, hey, welcome to all things at the end of our pie. Do you cut hole in middle? Are you one hole, multiple holes for venting? When you
I
don't put
do-
lattice on
I-
it, you
I
weirdo?
do 4 slits.
I always do lattice.
Oh my God. So you've never made an apple pie, is what you're telling me?
Kieran.
It's true. It's definitely
The
not
gloves
apple.
are about to come up.
Yeah, yeah.
But seriously, I've done a double crust, and when I've done the double crust, I just do a little hole cut out and chop.
Well, is it good lattice at least? Is it pretty? You make it real
It's
pretty.
beautiful lattice. I told you about my method for it.
Yeah.
It's frozen so that it keeps its shape.
No,
it's
but
not
like,
flapping around.
Have you seen the one where they do? I might have seen it like 2-3 days ago. Well, they'll do like different types of lattices at the same time. So they'd make different strips of different styles. So one would be a twist, one would have like a imprint on it, one would be straight, and then they'd lattice all of them. So it looked like a different
I see what
lace
you're saying.
materials over the
I
top.
see.
It was really pretty.
I don't get that creative, but I have done the little like cutouts of the apples from the dough. Like with the little like
For sure.
cutters. Yeah,
We,
and put those on top.
One thing we at the farm have talked about is a podcast about like after you get married, the recipes you need or the things you need after you've got married, like the starter kit. And this is one of them. Like an apple pie to me is that. Like it's one of the, you should have this in your arsenal and it should start to become your own.
Yeah.
And I feel like those of you who start out, maybe you haven't made apple pie, you haven't made it in a long time, you're probably going to make 50 apple pies before you make your own. And you're going to change and tweak it each time you bake it. And you should just record those changes. I feel like that's an important thing. Like what information do you record? Oh, I like that, but I'm going to change to this. Because like when you go 75-25 butter to cheese to put in the crust, I've lost Lee instantly. Like that's a huge win because then you don't have to have the cheese with it and it doesn't suddenly become very cheesy, but it adds to that. It's the perfect apple combination.
Yeah.
I feel like that experimental, like how to do that would be a good thing for us to talk about in the
Yeah.
future with folks. Because that to me is, I don't want to make a recipe from a cookbook or something else. I want to slowly manipulate it to make it mine and my own and to be able to have that recipe
Sure.
that people love.
I know I mentioned King Arthur before, and that's really in the beginning when I
Good
wasn't
foundation.
quite sure what I was doing. It was everything King Arthur out of their cookbook, and then started to realize and again, I'm not knocking their recipes; they're pretty for the most part dead on.
Yep.
I've also tried Alton Brown. He does a decent crust.
I loved
Yeah.
his recipes. Like when
Yeah.
you're not sure, you've never done something before, Alton Brown does a good job of like explaining the science and the cooking side
The
of it.
science and the cooking, and you get the video along with it to
Yep.
see what he's doing. Whereas King Arthur is just a cookbook with illustrations, but it's a preference thing. What tastes good on your palate? Do you want more cheese? Do you want less cheese? Do you want more butter?
Do you want
or more-
frangipane?
Right. Do you want frangipane? And so from there, you're taking this as a foundation, like you said, and then tweaking it over time. And then during the process, figuring out what actually cooks well and what doesn't. You know, you might want a heap load of cheese in there, but the reality is, if you're using the wrong cheese, it's going to become a very greasy crust.
Sure. No,
Yeah.
if it's too wet of a cheese, it's not the game to play into
Right,
that side of it.
exactly.
So, any last burners? We're gonna wrap this little sucker up. Any burners you really want to get out there, Lee or Marcy, before I turn off your mics and we talk about how lattice is definitely not a pie?
My recommendation is to try that vodka crust at home. I
100%.
think for those of you who do struggle with pie crust and want a flakier crust.
Yep.
Um,
And to be clear, when you're struggling, you've got your butter in. So you could take Marcy's 50-50, vodka to water. So if that's what your recipe is saying, replace half the water with vodka. You can do the same if the recipe's calling for milk for a heavy one. Try the grated butter thing. So grate a pound of butter, cold grater, not frozen. You grate it, then you put it on a sheet tray in the freezer, let it freeze, and then put it in a Ziploc bag and you kind of smash it up a little bit. Use that as your flaky. That's a good win to, and then don't over knead. It just comes together. And once it's together-ish, smash it down flat and then rest it as a flat disc. What you're about to roll out, like some people when they rest the dough will rest like the ball.
Yeah.
And like you've now got to let all of that come back to room temperature. Whereas if you refrigerate it as a flat disc in the shape you're about to roll, whatever that might be, that's a much quicker, easier way. And we always rest for a good 30 to 40 minutes.
30,
To be
40.
yeah.
So
It doesn't need to be that long. People sometimes I've got to rest it for overnight. 30, 40 minutes.
I find the hands, cutting the butter in with my hand, I find that very therapeutic.
Oh, totally. I'm not saying, I'm just,
Right.
if you want like a recovering lazy chef, I'm not recovering, I'm all lazy. The doing the other bit is doing the same work without having the same result. So I can make a pie crust very quickly, like minutes instead of the other side.
I do like using my hands, but for those of you who don't trust your hands, a food processor, just a few pulses will also work very well to get those like little pea-sized pieces of butter. And then you're not adding the heat of your hands as well. And if you are going to use your hands, I do like the chilled water, like dipping your fingers into an ice water bath.
What about you?
When I make pie crust, I put the bowl, I put the flour, I put the butter, all in the freezer. The night before I'll put the bowl,
committing.
the flour
Everything-
into the freezer.
Everything goes in the freezer. The butter, the bowl, the pie crust.
I'll cut the butter. I'll cut the
the
butter.
pie crust. I butter the pie pan and put it in the
We've
freezer.
crossed the
and
hour
it's
mark,
sitting
but I'm
in
coming
there.
back to this because guys, don't do that.
and the discs.
Could I ask? I will have one of you over to the farm and we'll do it. I will 100% commit to your method. I'll even use your recipe and not do that and show you there is no difference. Right? I will prove to you you are doing it out of posterity and memories of somebody having told you that's the way you have to do it, whereas it doesn't make a blind bit of difference. And if it does, it's so insignificant you wouldn't notice.
I don't know, Karen.
I think
it's you against
the world.
the world.
I mean, if the issue is whether or not to put the stuff all in the freezer first, but because what that does is that it allows you to just get in there with your hands and you don't have to worry about.
You don't have to worry
warming the
about.
stuff
See,
up
that's
or
what I'm
anything.
saying.
Right.
I got frozen flaky butter. I'm ready to go. I can make dough from butter to flour within 2 minutes.
Yeah.
2 minutes. Done. Done. And I mean done.
I will try your frozen grated butter.
And
method.
I guess the reason I'm saying this isn't even a today's generation, but today's world, because I don't actually think it's generational thing. I'm in it. I've got 2 kids. I've got a 9 and 11-year-old. I have no time for nothing, right? I work a pretty intense job every day. I have no extra spare time for me. The reality is I want to and need to cook as quickly as possible. So it's not even a hack. It's a way to get the same results without the same time commitment. Like if anyone's listening to this goes, I've got to put a bowl and flour in oh my God, I'm done. I'm out. Like I'm left. The train has left. I'm buying a pie. I'm buying the pie. I'm not making it. To me, that frozen butter is like a liberator to many things. I use it for other baking things. And then again, you talked about sumac. If it's in my pantry, I need to do it. If I'm going to add frozen flaked butter in my freezer, it has multiple purposes straight away. Okay, Lee, last burn-in must be for an apple pie person out there. The last thing you need to tell these folks.
just keep trying, keep practice. Practice makes perfect.
There
with
you go.
Pie crust.
Yeah. Don't get frustrated.
So
Frustrated.
my one for you listeners in this world is get weird with it. Like, especially at the beginning. Like, put some weird herbs or spices in your pie crust. Have fun with it.
Mhm.
Try the non-sugar route. Like, I'm definitely going to be the person at every podcast to tell you get hard sugar out of your recipes as best you can. There are places and homes for it to be there, but you can sweeten things with other things to put in there. And I think that, to me, if you were going to try something weird and wacky, is, hey, replace the sugar with some ground up prunes or dates or raisins or dried cherries, and it adds a flavor and also adds the sweetness to it. Like, that diversity of those things in there, that's a definite must for people to try.
I kind of want to try this ground dehydrated apple, but I want to try it in the pie crust.
So again, no no tie to chef steps, but they do an amazing job. Go look at it. It's an amazing, like, the lengths they went to for this apple pie. No one should ever have gone there. It was like Heston Blumenthal had lost his brain in that recipe.
But if I'm adding ground dehydrated apple to my pie crust, I'm freezing it first.
I am going to. I've been on a herb kick lately, and I've been making lemon rosemary and lemon lavender and lemon thyme shortbread. So I'm gonna start adding lemon thyme to the pie crust.
Yeah, that or
And-
tarragon. Tarragon's also really good. That aniseed flavor is really good in
And
there.
then lemon thyme in with the apples too. So I'm gonna start adding herbs to my apple pie. So.
All right, that being said, we're going to wrap up this slice and we could talk about some other things. You guys have a lovely afternoon. So much, my lovelies, for tuning in and listening to today's episode of the Heartland Hot Dish podcast. Hit that like button, subscribe, and leave us a review. Your feedback helps us grow and reach more listeners just like you. Until next time, keep savoring the flavors of the Heartland and sharing the love for this vibrant community. Take care and stay connected.